All right, folks, we are back on the W.A.D.E concept presented by The Ring Magazine. Today, I wanted to talk about the UFC 321 main event, Tom Aspinall, Ciryl Gane, and I'm particularly excited about this fight because unlike the rest of the internet, I still want to see how good Tom Aspinall is. Yes, he is the heavyweight champion. Yes, he should have been fighting John Jones. John Jones ducked. There's no debating that. It was clear John wanted no part of it. And now that the White House card is in play, maybe John does. I don't know. But I'm still not necessarily convinced that Tom Aspinall will be the greatest heavyweight we've ever seen, or that he's as good as people are telling me he is, because I want to see more of what he brings in a fight that doesn't just go one round. And I'm not saying that's his fault. You fight the people that are in front of you. And in about 10 days from now, that'll be Ciryl Gane, who presents an interesting matchup that may have Tom Aspinall in some danger. What do I mean? The breakdown. Let's go. But before we keep going, guys, real quick, this message is sponsored by Raycon. It's Raycon's anniversary. And what better way to celebrate than with a deal on the Everyday Earbuds Classic? They're now 20% off, so this is the perfect time to get your hands on these. Reliable, super comfy, and easy to take anywhere. You'll see why they've been the fan favorite since day one. And by the way, these new colors are awesome. Personally, I'm into the cool mint. I've never seen earbuds in this shade or shape before, and they feel like an accessory that's a little bit different. It's kind of cool. And here's the kicker. Raycon delivers the same premium audio quality as the big brands, but at half the price. You add in over 3 million happy customers and a 30-day happiness guarantee, and there's zero reason to overpay. And just in case you didn't have enough information, there's up to 32 hours of battery life here. There's a quick charge function that gives you 10 minutes of charge for 90 minutes of playtime, and an awareness mode when you're walking around running errands that lets you hear what's happening outside as well as what's going on in your earbud. And really quickly, guys, I just want to show you how easy it is to use these Raycon's Everyday Earbuds Classics. All you do, you pop open your case, obviously connected to Bluetooth to your phone, whatever device. You pop in those earbuds. Now you not only have a noise-canceling experience for you to work, listen to music, whatever, but with one tap, you can activate awareness mode and keep focused on what you're doing while being aware of your surroundings. I use this product. I think you guys should too. So click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/Wade. Once again, that is buyraycon.com/Wade to get 20% off the Everyday Earbuds Classic. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video. And now let's get back into the breakdown. So everywhere you turn on the internet right now, everyone is, I don't want to, it is glazing to a degree, but everyone is on the Tom Aspinall hype train. And I understand why, because Tom Aspinall, since he's gotten to the UFC, has pretty much made light work of every fighter he's ever stood in front of, outside of the weird kind of knee injury TKO loss to Curtis Blades, which he then came back and beat Curtis Blades very dominantly in their second fight. So it's hard. It's hard to look at Tom Aspinall's strength of schedule here, if we're using college football terms, and believe there's anybody on there that would have been threatening to Tom. So yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a difficult thing to look at anybody on Tom's record as we take a look here and act like any of it was really a challenge to Tom Aspinall. Maybe Sergey would have been. Pavlovich was a big puncher and potentially could have given Tom some problems, but stood right in the pocket with him and got dropped. I just don't see any. The heavyweight division is rough right now. It is awful. And outside of 2 or 3 big names that you could mention right now in that division, a Sergey Pavlovich, a Curtis Blades, Alexander Volkov, a Ciryl Gane, a Tom Aspinall, there really isn't anyone that's there that either gets people excited or presents an opportunity for Tom Aspinall to potentially have a tough matchup. Now, with all that being said, this strength of schedule doesn't really tell me a lot about Tom Aspinall and what his capabilities are when he goes to that next level. Do I think Ciryl Gane is that next level? No, I don't. I think the Ciryl Gane is this level, the level of guys that he's already beaten, which is why I am picking Tom Aspinall to win this fight. I know Wade curse is in effect. It is what it is. But I do see some dangerous elements to this fight, and I'm very interested to see what happens when Tom fights probably the best striker he's ever seen in Ciryl Gane. But the problem is this isn't kickboxing. It's not boxing. It's MMA. So Tom has more well-rounded skills than Ciryl Gane. And again, I think you'll see that in about 10 days. But let's break the fight down and kind of go step by step as to why this will probably be the toughest fight that Tom has had, or maybe it won't be. Maybe Tom will do what he does in all these different fights and walk out in the first round and knock a motherfucker dead. His entire fight history is incredible. It's first round, second round, and nothing else. Predominantly of the, how many fights he had? 18 fights. 1, 2, 3. Is it just 3? So 15 of his 18 fights have finished in the first round. And of the 15 that have finished, he's finished 14 of them. And again, the Curtis Blades weird, fluky knee injury thing, that you can't really hold that against him. But this is a strength and potentially a weakness of Tom Aspinall. I know you guys have heard it from every MMA channel on the internet over the last couple of months that Tom Aspinall still is yet to prove what he can do over 5 rounds. And it's not his fault. If you go out and murk a motherfucker in 3 minutes, that's what happens. But it is going to be interesting to see because Ciryl Gane has gone, no pun intended, 5 rounds a couple of different times now. And when you look at Ciryl Gane's record, yes, it's a bit of an up and down when it comes to how he gets fights done. But the only 2 actual losses, even though you can argue that Alexander Volkov beat him, the only 2 losses that he has are to John Jones and Francis Ngannou, 2 former champions, right? So this is technically his 3rd actual title opportunity, even though he won the interim title off Derek Lewis. But look at the different varieties in which Ciryl Gane can fight and win, right? He wins by TKO early in his career. Obviously, not so much as he's gotten into his later part, not known as a massive power striker, but a guy that can overwhelm you. But 5 rounds, 5 rounds, 5 rounds. He's gone the distance 3 times and gone past the second round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 times. So he understands what it means to go late into fights and find victory. But these numbers, these names, this win-loss doesn't tell the whole story of this fight. We have Ciryl Gane, who is predominantly I wouldn't say kickboxer, but a striker on the feet, a guy that can use his elbows, knees, feet, hands, the art of the 8 limbs. Ciryl Gane is very good. He stands bladed, and in both stances, he can hit you, again, with his kicks upstairs as well. And in this fight, he will present a reach advantage on Tom Aspinall, who is, I think, the same height as Ciryl Gane. I think they're both around 6'4", but Tom Aspinall's reach is 78 inches, Ciryl 81. So if you are looking at ways that Ciryl Gane can present problems for Tom Aspinall, number one, I think everything has to do with his takedown defense or his grappling defense versus Tom Aspinall's grappling offense. Now, Tom, not really known as a big-time offensive wrestler, but will do it in spurts. The beautiful takedowns he had of Alexander Volkov and the submissions there. I do think that he is better known for his black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, been grappling for forever, but it's the offensive grappling that I want to see how legit it is versus someone that has now seen that Tom is dangerous with his grappling, right? I want to see what Ciryl Gane, who has been in there with John Jones and got completely obliterated, who was out-grappled by Francis. And again, you see a common theme here. The guys that out-grapple Ciryl Gane usually beat him. That doesn't sound good for Ciryl Gane when he's fighting a guy like Tom Aspinall, who is way more well-rounded. And I think, especially in this fight, Ciryl Gane might be the better, and probably is the better striker out of the 2 of them. He probably is the better striker with all 8 contact points than Tom Aspinall. Does that mean that he was going to win this fight by knockout? No. And in fact, if somebody was going to get knocked out, I'd favor Tom Aspinall to knock Ciryl Gane out because, one, Tom goes for it. Will stand there in the pocket with you, sometimes even trade with his chin up, which is dangerous. We'll get back to that. But he commits to his punches, and he has real knockout power, one-punch knockout power, whereas Ciryl Gane does tend to have to overwhelm you. And I know it's heavyweight and anybody can get knocked out. I'm just showing you the differences. So if Ciryl is going to do this, and if Tom is going to be in legitimate danger, it will be because Ciryl has either established a distance that Tom can't shoot from, with his kicks, eating up the legs, the push kicks, the teeps. There's a lot of techniques that Ciryl throws that do keep the distance and keep him in the outside range to where he can circle the cage. And if you notice in a lot of his fights, including the Francis Ngannou fight, where yes, Francis had some knee issues and wasn't necessarily as mobile as he needed to be, that's all Ciryl did, was poke at him from the outside and was winning that fight until Francis Ngannou decided to grapple. And it wasn't necessarily a super damaging level of grappling. It was just control. He was able to control Ciryl Gane, and it wasn't really hard for him to do it. And that's another big problem if you're Ciryl. If you get pushed up against the fence, and Ciryl loves to fight off his back foot, he loves to kind of invite the pressure and then circle around it and tag you from the outside and then blitz you with the combinations and switch in stance. And there's just a lot of things he likes to do off your forward movement that, again, put him in really bad spots, especially with a guy like Tom, who is looking to get to boxing range. And if he isn't in boxing range, or if he's not having success where he's at, he will potentially initiate that grappling, then come upstairs with the striking. And it's a whole mess. So Ciryl has to keep his distance, I think, at least early, and see if he can start to win this fight on a point scale system by using his reach, by using his kicks, by being more calculated and technical with his striking versus being super aggressive, because we've seen how that works out for anybody that wants to be super aggressive with Tom Aspinall. They get dealt a swift hand of NyQuil and the fight's over in, 30 seconds. So that can't happen. And that's not who Ciryl Gane is. So I think that is at least how you want to start the fight. On the other side, Tom Aspinall, I'll be interested to see how he approaches this fight, because he has made a statement running through this heavyweight division. And I'll be honest, heavyweight in the UFC is probably the worst technical division in the sport. It has no names that anyone recognizes. It doesn't have a ton of fighters with a massive skill set and an ability to hang with a fighter as well-rounded as Tom Aspinall, and that's why you've seen virtually nobody ascend through the ranks of this new era of heavyweight. They have, what's his name, Jailton Almeida. We'll see what he does, but there's not a ton of big-name heavyweights, and there's not a ton of guys that look like they can challenge Tom Aspinall right now. If Tom goes in there and just demolishes Ciryl Gane, he will reign over this heavyweight division for a very long time, unless John Jones comes back. And I know people aren't giving John a chance there, but I think John still possesses the fight IQ, skill, maybe not the speed and youthfulness that he had, but I think it could be an interesting fight. Regardless, if Tom takes this fight and doesn't get overzealous with the let me walk in there and knock this guy out in one round and dip, but fights his fight, stays aggressive, and is patient, this could be an all-time performance for Tom Aspinall. I don't doubt that. But there is something about fighting a striker as dangerous and as varied and has more variety like a Ciryl Gane does, that maybe you do underestimate a bit of his grappling defense and, I can just take him down whatever, so let's start with the hands and get caught with something early. I don't know. But if you're Tom Aspinall, I think either being in close proximity to Ciryl Gane, being inside that kick range, punch and clinch range is perfect for Tom, or being completely out. Either one of those things is good for Tom Aspinall, because if you're in the mid-range where he can kick you and you can't kick him, or he can touch you and you can't touch him, then it becomes a point fight. And in a point fight with a point fighter like Ciryl Gane, you're going to lose that. At least you're going to lose rounds because of that. And I want to see what happens if Tom is having to use more of his grappling and isn't as successful with it right off the bat, right? What we've seen right now is Tom Aspinall be massively successful with his grappling and striking and pretty much everything he wants to do right now at heavyweight. This is like watching Mike Tyson just run through the heavyweight division in his early 20s and knocking motherfuckers dead, and just wondering, okay, does this guy have any weakness? And you weren't able to see it because the fights were lasting 40 seconds, 20 seconds, 15, and you didn't get to know what's his gas tank look like. What happens when he does fight someone that is able to move their head or can get inside and work him to the body and then touch him upstairs? And they've got a nasty hook as well, and Tyson isn't able to get off center line or his rhythm's interrupted. All those things came to fruition later in Tyson's career when people weren't scared of him or whatever. There's a sense of, okay, well, what does Tom do if he doesn't knock a guy out in the first round, or he doesn't take him down and submit him right away? And I know that's like the worst way to analyze a fight. What happens if he isn't a good fighter? That's not realistic. But you do have to ask those questions, because can you keep that same intensity later into the fight? And it is a lot about Tom's gas tank. If things don't work out early, or if things become predictable, then what do you have? Do you have another layer past that? And again, I think Tom is more well-rounded than Ciryl, but even if you are more well-rounded, you still have to be able to get to the positions where you're better. If Ciryl is just working takedown defense like a fucking madman and is able to hold Tom just at bay for a couple of rounds, then cardio does become a factor. What I look at when I see Tom Aspinall, I know Ciryl is cut up and he is fast twitch, I think, as well. And he slows down as fights goes on a little bit as well. But when I look at Tom Aspinall, everything he does, it looks like his fast twitch. Very explosive, a lot of movement. He's very quick. He's very fast. Everything you'll hear leading into fight week next week about Tom Aspinall is agility, explosivity, power. That's what you're going to hear. And that's true. But when it comes down to what happens if that goes, that's where we will get into the wild, wild west. I don't know what happens. If Tom suddenly is in round 3, maybe banked a couple of rounds, but is starting to feel the effects of fatigue. And that's really the only way I see Tom losing this fight, is if he does gas himself out, or if he takes stupid risks and decides he wants to kickbox with Ciryl Gane, which I don't see happening. I think Tom is a smart enough, well-rounded MMA fighter to not put himself at a disadvantage round after round, or to blow his wad early, for lack of a better term. But that is where the danger lies. And let me be clear, Ciryl Gane can win this fight. I know he's like a plus 270 underdog, but he has the ability, striking on the feet, and even in the Francis Ngannou fight, at least at the early part of the fight, Ciryl Gane did a decent enough job of keeping himself. When he put his back on the cage, he was able to get out. He was able to fight through, grab underhooks, pivot out, and reset. And then later in the fight, Francis eventually found his grappling ability and ended up dumping Ciryl Gane on his head. But it also took Francis an unsuccessful 5-round fight versus a younger Stipe Miocic, and then beating Stipe to understand that experience level. If you guys remember when Francis had to go 5 rounds for the first time after he had knocked everybody out in the division. And again, I'm not saying Francis is Tom Aspinall. Completely different fighters. But after he was knocking motherfuckers dead, sent Alistair Overeem's head to the moon, and he had to go 5 rounds with Stipe, you saw the gas tank deplete like this. And that was without grappling. That was just with striking. That was just with explosive, high-level, massive movements. Now, Tom is a bit more efficient with his striking. And again, I am assuming he is more prepared to be more well-rounded than Francis ever could have at that point or ever thought of, because Tom's been doing this a little bit longer. But when I talk about the danger of this fight for Tom Aspinall, it's a couple of things. Number one, Tom is pretty much the last hope right now of heavyweight to create a new star for a while. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's other heavyweights coming through and they're going to be the next big thing. But as of right now, Tom Aspinall is the biggest thing the UFC has seen at heavyweight since Francis Ngannou and since Jon Jones, right? Jon, since he's retired and has not really been looked at the same way by the MMA community, he doesn't seem to have the same cachet right now as a Tom Aspinall, at least for the hardcore fan base. I still think as a casual viewer, Tom Aspinall is nowhere near Jon Jones's name, legacy, any of that. But losing this would be, I mean, it wouldn't be catastrophic for Tom Aspinall, but it would set back a lot of the good work he's done at heavyweight to gain this massive fan base. So I think there is a lot of pressure there. And let's not forget, again, Ciryl Gane has essentially 4, or this will be his 4th, with 1 interim title fight, right? This will be his 4th title fight, which gives you a lot more experience. For Tom, however you want to look at some of these, fights, he's had 2, essentially, title fights, and he's done well in both of those, but this one feels like a lot more pressure. This one feels like there are things that Tom Aspinall is going to have to deal with this time around that he hasn't in opportunities past. Not just outstriking Curtis Blades, who on the feet doesn't really have it. Even then, Curtis Blades caught him with something right before he was caught. Sergey catching Tom Aspinall with something right before he was caught, but both guys not having the technical ability of a Ciryl Gane to stand and actually see what's what on the feet. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what happens, but this is a dangerous fight for many reasons outside of the cage and inside it. For Tom Aspinall's aura of invincibility, which right now the entire MMA community thinks he's going to walk through Ciryl Gane in 1 round. And if he does that, then fucking, yeah, start the parade, hit the fireworks. This guy is on a trajectory upward that we haven't seen in a long time at heavyweight. But you also have to have someone to put him in there with, and we'll get to that when we get to it. Hopefully that's Jon Jones. Maybe it's Alex Pereira. I don't know. But I'm telling you guys, this is a dangerous fight. I would say it's a dangerous fight based on what happens in the first round. If Tom is not as successful as he's normally used to in that first into mid-second round, then this thing becomes a very dangerous fight. Hit the panic button moment if we get into round 3 and it's a 1-1 fight or it's not going Tom's way. But conversely, we haven't seen Tom Aspinall quit. At least not in the UFC. We haven't seen him in really any trouble. And we've seen on the other side, Ciryl Gane, when things get a little tough, the grit, the grind, I wonder if it's there. I'd hope so. This is his 3rd title opportunity. But there is something to be said for a guy that's never tasted defeat really in the UFC. I know he's had some losses outside of the UFC. Got ankle hooked or heel hooked by somebody before he got there. And I don't know what happened in his other, I guess he had illegal elbows to a guy that he got DQ'd for. So Tom hasn't had real defeat in this level of competition and with this amount of exposure. I think that's going to serve him well, the confidence level walking in there, never having been defeated with that belt around his waist and on his shoulder versus Ciryl Gane, who already knows what it's like to lose and lose in terrible fashion. That can be a motivator or that could be something you become comfortable with. Anyway, I do think there's danger in this fight for Tom Aspinall. Not because he's overlooking, not because he should be, but because Ciryl Gane is a bit of a wild card, especially on the feet. And if Tom Aspinall is not successful early, what does plan B look like? What happens when we need, I know he said he's preparing for 5 rounds, and that's great. I think Tom should prepare for 5 rounds. I don't think that any fighter should be preparing to walk in there and knock a guy out and dip. And if that doesn't happen, what do we do? But it is a real thing. When you get in there, no matter how much you prepared for 5, how much did you anticipate not being successful in 1 or 2? If that's the case, and you can't find your range striking, and because you can't find your range striking, you can't find your takedowns or you can't find your grappling, then what happens? These are all things that we need to consider when talking about this fight. Now, with all that being said, I've thrown at you a couple of different scenarios. One being Tom Aspinall walks in there, knocks out Ciryl Gane in the first 1 or 2 rounds. 2 being Ciryl Gane handles himself very well on the feet, frustrates Tom Aspinall. Tom overextends, gets hit with something. Ciryl potentially follows up, TKO Ciryl Gane, or Ciryl controls the fight from the outside using his kicks, his teeps. Tom can't get rhythm, starts to gas, and Ciryl wins a decision because Tom just can't put it together late. Or we see something we've never seen before, which is Tom Aspinall thriving into the later rounds. If that happens, I'll be impressed with whatever happens. But if Tom were to find a way to be fresh in the later rounds and dominating this fight, 50-44, 50-45 type stuff, I would probably be not more impressed because a knockout is still a knockout, but I'd be very impressed with that performance as well. And having said it all, I think this, like I said, I keep going back to it. I think Ciryl Gane being slept on the way he is absolutely insane. I think he's got a very good chance of at least pushing Tom to a place he's never been. But I still, at least right now, I still have to think that Tom Aspinall is going to get this fight done. I just don't see the places that Ciryl Gane is better being good enough for him to stop what's in front of him, right? Just being a good striker, in my opinion, is not enough to stop Tom Aspinall from beating you. Because, again, he is so varied in his offense. He doesn't necessarily get hit a ton. He's lost in the UFC, but not really. He got hurt versus Curtis Blades. Both men have their chin exposed, leaning back when they strike sometimes, so that's a toss-up. But if this fight is to ever change from feet to ground, it will be because Tom got a hold of Ciryl Gane. And let's not forget, it wasn't just John Jones that outgrappled Ciryl Gane. It wasn't even just Francis Ngannou that did, but Alexander Volkov slung him around as well. And again, we could argue that Volkov should have won that fight. And I just think when it comes to the well-rounded nature of MMA, Tom is better. He is. And if he's able to prove that in this fight, then again, the sky is the limit for Tom when it comes to a potential matchup at the White House with, I would hope, John Jones or Alex Pereira, either one. But if you're overlooking, as a fan, not Tom, but if you're overlooking Ciryl Gane, you're making a mistake. He will at least be ready cardio-wise, striking-wise. Have no idea how he's going to deal with Tom's takedowns. I don't know how Tom is going to deal with Ciryl's maybe improved takedown defense. But like I said, every fight's a dangerous one, but this one particularly more, in my opinion, for Tom Aspinall, because Ciryl Gane is a better striker than everyone Tom has ever fought. At heavyweight, one kick, one punch, one elbow, one knee can change the entire fight. And I don't know if I've seen Tom Aspinall under more pressure than he will be on Saturday, October 25th. And that's a big, big deal. Yeah, there was pressure for Curtis Blades. Yes, there was pressure for Sergey Pavlovich, but this one's different. Everyone thinks Tom Aspinall is going to win this fight. Everyone is already looking toward the White House card. Everyone's already talking about Tom Aspinall, Alex Pereira, or Tom Aspinall, John Jones at the White House. There's all these plans lined up, and here's Ciryl Gane, who's no one is really thinking about, no one's talking about, and no one gives a chance to win. I would say this is the least pressure he's been under. Maybe even less pressure than the John Jones fight, because Jones was looked at as, potentially a little older and slower coming up to heavyweight. This is a freaking Cadillac of heavyweights people are telling me about Tom Aspinall. So Ciryl Gane under almost no pressure. Can he get it done? Like I said, I think it's dangerous, but ultimately no. I think Tom Aspinall is going to do this. And when he does, he will get all due credit from me, and I hope the rest of people, for beating a really good fighter, in my opinion, in Ciryl Gane. That's what I think. You guys let me know in the comments below. Does Tom Aspinall slip on the banana peel here? Does Ciryl Gane shock everyone? What happens on October 25th, UFC 321 main event? Tom Aspinall, Ciryl Gane. Don't have those answers. More videos coming up on this, obviously. So I guess we'll find out.